I think the first thing we should do is get a little bit of an understanding of what exactly is death. Of course, it's tragic, but we need to have a more concrete understanding of what it is that we're grieving. That itself would help. At the very least, it would make the grieving healthy, because there's healthy grieving and there is unhealthy grieving. There is grieving that is the appropriate response to tragedy, to loss. And then there's grieving that doesn't go anywhere. It's not really a response to the loss. It's leading to a depression or to a jaded view of life. What is death? Let's look at it. People say it's unknown. We don't know. We don't know what happens when you die, and the fear of the unknown is what makes death so intimidating and so frightening. It's not unknown. It's been around for a long time. In fact, God said to Adam and Eve, you eat from that tree, you will die. So death was introduced at a very early stage in history. So here's the issue. Here's the question. Can life die? Can a living thing stop living? The answer is no. Life can't die. That's an oxymoron. You can't have dry water. Life can't die. Life lives. So what does it mean that something died? What is loss of life? There can't be a loss of life. Because a living being is composed of body and soul. However you want to describe it, however you want to understand what a body is and what a soul is, but without the combination, you don't have a living being. The soul provides life because the soul is a living entity. It is alive. It's like the comedian who says, what batteries do batteries run on? A battery doesn't need a battery. It has energy. Of course, it got it from someplace else, but the point is, a soul doesn't need to be given life. It is life. It's alive. Therefore, it cannot die. The body, on the other hand, which is the receptacle for the soul, is never really alive to begin with. It doesn't have a life of its own. It lives when the soul gives it life. So what happens when body and soul separate? What dies? The soul doesn't die because it can't. It goes on living. And the body doesn't really die because it was never alive to begin with. It's like saying the computer died because I pulled the plug out. What does it mean that a soul continues to live? It's also an important little detail. How does a soul continue to live? It's just energy. Life is energy. Life is a vibration. But when a soul continues to live, it means it continues to be a soul. Because there is genetic life. There's the life of a plant. There's the life of an animal. There's the life in the abstract. Angels, forms of life. What does it mean that a soul remains alive? Not only that it continues to give off energy, it retains its identity, its memories, its experiences. It still is not only in existence, it still is who it was. That's the real news. This we wouldn't know without revelation. We would quickly figure out, just logically, that the energy that a body had when it was running around doing stuff, and all of a sudden it doesn't have that energy, we would very quickly figure out that the energy went somewhere. It didn't just stop existing. That's not news. Nothing just disappears and stops existing. So the energy that the body had, call it life, doesn't end, it doesn't disappear. Perhaps it changes, it mutates, it goes someplace, it turns into something else, but it doesn't disappear. That we would know scientifically. How do we know that not only doesn't it disappear, it doesn't become generic energy? But I think that in the Christian concept of eternal damnation, the original idea was not that you burn in hell forever, with demons and devils and pitchforks or tridents. The idea that you are punished forever doesn't mean you suffer forever. It means you stop existing forever. How do you stop existing? You lose your identity. The soul becomes generic energy. It's not a person anymore. It doesn't have a personality anymore. It can now become the energy of a lightning strike, of a plant, but it's not a person anymore. That is the worst kind of punishment for the worst kind of person who doesn't deserve to be preserved. So that's a rare thing. The personality remains. The memories remain. And the relationships remain. So here's something that adults need to know. God forbid when there is a loss. We're supposed to mourn. We're supposed to mourn and grieve deeply. In the olden days, they would hire people to actually wail at the funeral to encourage crying. That's like making sure that the wound bleeds, because that washes out the infectious germs. If you don't bleed after you're cut, it's not healthy. If you don't cry when you're grieving, that's not healthy. So they would actually have professional wailers who would make this horrible, tragic noise so that if your emotions are blocked and you can't grieve, that sound or that wailing releases your grief. so that you can cry and grieve properly. So yes, we have to grieve. And we're even told how long, 7 days, what it takes to grieve, the way you sit, the way you eat, the way you talk to people. Lots of very helpful instructions. But there is one danger that we need to be aware of and careful of. And that is, in a sense of loyalty to the person lost, to the person who passed away, people sometimes feel that the more they grieve, the more loyal they are to their loved one. And to stop grieving is like abandoning, cheating on your loved one. To go back to business as usual seems callous, insensitive, and wrong. So how long do you grieve? When do you go back to business as usual? Or never? So here's a really important concept. Whatever relationship you had still exists. The father who loses a child is still a father, and the child is still a child, even if the soul is in heaven. And every child needs its father, and every father needs to be a father to the child. When we go into grieving, it happens quite often that instead of being a father, the father becomes a griever, a mourner. It's a whole new title, a whole new role in life, a new identity. I am grieving. It's not right. Who gave you permission to stop being a father? You're loyal to your child by grieving? The loyalty to your child is to be a father. To be a father means do what's right for your child. I was speaking to a couple who had lost a child, and they had stopped. They quit on everything. They just couldn't. I asked whether the child, who was a daughter, had communicated with the parents after passing away. The father said yes. He saw her twice. Each time she was smiling. I said, "What did your daughter tell you?" He said, "She didn't say anything. She just smiled and let me know that she's okay." I said, "Ever wonder why she came twice?" Because she's trying to tell you something. Not just that she's okay, but that she needs to be okay and you're not letting her. You're quitting on life. You're not keeping Shabbos anymore because of her. She doesn't enjoy that. She doesn't deserve that. She doesn't want to be the reason and the cause of your quitting, of your losing interest in life. So she is telling you, please, don't do this to me. I'm okay. Why aren't you okay? I'm still your daughter. Why did you quit being my father? So that's a very important part of grieving that is described and defined by Jewish law, which at first glance seems a little strange. How can you tell people how to grieve? How long to grieve? Isn't that a natural process and should just be spontaneous? Actually, no. We need to know how to grieve because we can so easily become chronic grievers, thinking that that's loyalty. But once we understand what death is, and it doesn't sound so good all of a sudden to be chronic grievers. It's not right for the soul that you're grieving over. So after 7 days, the custom is that the people who come to visit the griever, the mourner, actually say, get up. You've been sitting, Shiva. You've been sitting for 7 days in grief and mourning. Get up. It's done. What's done? What the soul needed is complete. The soul doesn't need your grieving anymore. So stop. It served its purpose. It was good. If you go beyond this, obviously, the pain is still there. Torah doesn't tell you how much pain to feel, but it tells you what's right to do for the person you're grieving over. That we wouldn't know spontaneously. So the Torah has to tell us, the soul in heaven needed you to grieve for 7 days, while it made the adjustment to being out of the body. But now the adjustment is done, the soul doesn't need the grieving anymore. So if you continue to grieving, don't say it's out of loyalty to the soul, because that's not what the soul needs anymore. That is an important little piece of information. We wouldn't know that on our own. So the first thing we do is get this idea clear in our own mind. Death is not the end of life. It's a pretty shocking idea, no? Death is not the end of life. Life cannot end. It does not end. So what then is death? It is not the absence of life. Death means the combination of body and soul is now ended. Because a body and soul really have no business being together. A soul is the most heavenly of the heavenly beings, and a body is the most earthy of all earthy beings. It's made of earth. The combination is amazing. That a body and soul can actually merge to the degree that it does, so that the body comes alive. Wow, that's not like the puppeteer who pulls strings and makes it look as if the arm is moving or the leg is moving. No, when the soul is in the body is really moving. It's alive with the energy of the soul. Of course, when the soul leaves, the body is just a body. So really, it's an incredible miracle for which we have to thank God every day, every morning, for returning the soul to the body. Because they really should not be compatible. Every person born is given a certain amount of time, a precise amount of time. How long is this soul going to be in this body? Down to the minute, to the second. And that's why we're never allowed to interfere and end a life, even if it's just a moment before death would happen anyway. Because every minute is prescribed. Every minute has its purpose. So a person is born into this world and the angel announces, this person is going to live 98 years, 3 months. So many and so many days, and so many and so many hours, and so many and so many minutes. To interfere and take away a minute of that life goes against the entire plan. We don't interfere with death, but we also don't cause it, even a moment before it happens. So, what is death? Death means time is up. Not life is up. Time is up. It's time for the soul to go back to where it came from, and for the body to go back to where it came from. So death means the term is over. Literally, how the Medrash puts it, you ran out of days, not out of life. The days ended. Which days? The days prescribed or announced by the angel for how long the soul is going to be in a body. That miraculous union between body and soul has run out its time. So what are we grieving? Now, of course, there is the human side of it, which is, I'm lonely. I miss the person. I want to be with that person. Who am I missing? A person who is in existence, but I can't get to him. To grieve means to feel the absence. The absence. But the absence of what? Of who? If it's over, if the person no longer exists, then it's just a memory. It's like, you can't say I'm homesick if you never had a home. You had a home and now you miss it. But if that home doesn't exist anymore, then you don't miss it. You just remember it. And there's a difference between grieving and nostalgia. Nostalgia means a nice memory, wishful thinking, if only we could have that again. That's not grieving. Grieving means there is somebody I desperately want to be with. Not a memory, a somebody. Because that somebody exists. Only distant. We used to be close. We were in the same universe. Now we're in different universes. But there is someone who I miss. And that's why you have to consider, if you miss someone, then it can't be a one-way street. You have to take into consideration this someone who you are grieving. What are they feeling? You got to be considerate in a relationship. So, is your grief making the other person happier? or miserable. Sometimes telling somebody, I miss you so much, I miss you so much. You're getting on the person's nerves, and they're going to stop missing you. So consider the other side of the relationship. Remain a father, remain a husband, remain a child, and continue the identity you had. Don't take on a new identity. There's no such thing as a chronic mourner. That's a mistake. It's a disaster for everybody. Now, we get that clearly into our mind. We're not so intimidated by death. In fact, and listen to this, if we were really wise in a godly kind of way, then we would realize life is permanent. Death is temporary. You got to admit, that sounds better than the other way around. How is it that we're so convinced, everybody, everywhere, for as long as anybody can remember, death is permanent? Oh, you're gone, you're gone. Life is very temporary. A brief moment, you're here, and then you're not here. Life is fleeting. Death is permanent. What kind of morbid thinking is that? It's senseless. Life is everything. Death is nothing. Why would death be permanent and life temporary, fleeting, and fragile? And no. Life is forever. The question is only where. Life on earth has its limit. But life itself, permanent. In fact, it may even be the definition of life. That which is alive is forever alive. That which is dead should come back to life. Why not? So a philosopher once asked one of the sages, how can you believe that the dead will be resurrected? How can you believe that a body that died will come back and the soul will return and that body will live again? The dry bones will live again? How can you believe such a thing? Don't you see that the direction in nature is from life to death? That which is fully alive is going to die. And you think that something dead is going to come alive? No, it's a one-way street. Interesting observation. Because what we see is living things dying. We don't see dead things coming alive. So it seems like a really good question. The sage said, you start in the middle and you confuse yourself. Living things all die. Where did life come from? The question is the body, right? The bones. Dry bones will live again? Well, you see, it once was alive and it couldn't stay alive. So if it can't stay alive when it is alive, how is it going to come alive? Now, you're talking about the body. The body doesn't start living and then dies. It starts not existing and then exists and is given a life. So the question is not how can it live again? The question is how can it exist again? It went from non-existing to existing once. Now it's going to go from having existed to existing again. That's not such a miracle anymore. Let's not start it in the middle. Life begins as a purpose, not as a fact. As a result of that purpose, a soul enters a body. A body is created for that soul. It can't come back again. Now, it's not like that joke about the guy who was frustrated because the match wouldn't strike, wouldn't light. And he says, I can't believe this. A minute ago, it lit. Well, won't it light again? Okay, that's funny. But the body didn't exist, and then suddenly it did exist. So now to exist a second time is not possible? The big miracle was already accomplished. It went from never existing to existing. So that which already existed, it can't exist again, the same way it did the first time. Death is temporary. Death is temporary. Life is permanent. Now, sit down with your children and tell them this, but with conviction. Understand it yourself, make it clear in your own mind, and then convey that to the children. The biggest part of the damage of loss will be alleviated. Not knowing what death is impossible to live with. So when a child says, where is my father? Where is my mother? You say, oh, he's with God now. Sounds very nice, but you haven't really answered the question at all. Child doesn't know where God is. Child doesn't know what God is. And so saying that he's with God is pretty much like saying, I don't know. But if you explain it, if you understand it, if it makes sense to you, if it's real, then you have an answer. And we have to have an answer. There was a young man from Oxford, very bright young man, and he decided to do research on the Jewish philosophy of Judaism. And he came to the United States and he was interviewing the spokesman for Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, Orthodox Judaism. He had one initial fundamental question. What is your belief about life after death? One rabbi spokesman said to him, we are not sure yet. We don't have a final opinion on that. That was his first question. He got up and he said, thank you very much, and he left. If you don't know what happens when a person passes away, you can't call yourself a religion, you can't call yourself a philosophy, you don't know anything. It is such a fundamental question. It's not a religious question. And it's not a question of faith. We must know. How can we live life not knowing what life is? How can we grieve loss when we don't know what the loss is? So this helps a lot. The fear of the unknown is real. particularly for children, their imagination. If you don't tell them exactly what's happening, they have to decide for themselves what's happening. And that's dangerous, because very often they will decide that what is happening is that they are being punished for their sins. That the parent passed away because they caused it. And you go for therapy and the therapist says, no. It wasn't your fault, you didn't cause it. Yeah, that's nice, but you're not giving me a better explanation, so I think it's still true. I must have caused it. So you don't leave it to children's imagination. You tell them what it is before they conjure up these ideas. Okay, let's now turn to a more practical application thing. A child loses a parent or a sibling. What should they do? It may be an unspoken question, but it's inevitable. They've got to be asking themselves, so what do I do? You're telling me how to feel, how to grieve, how to understand. Okay, fine. I understand what it's all about. What do I do? So there are two parts to the question. What do I do in this relationship? God forbid my parent passed away. So what do I do? Whose child am I now? How do I relate to my mother now? Judaism says, the Torah says, honor your mother and father does not stop and does not end when they pass away. You continue to honor them because you continue to be their child and they continue to be your parent. So who dismissed you? Who fired you from this job of honoring your parents? How do you honor parents after they pass away? Well, you don't refer to them by their first name, just as you did when they were alive. You still don't sit in their chair. Set it aside. You quote their wisdom to others. You attribute all your success to them and all your wisdom and good character. You attribute. You give them credit. You honor them. Why? Because that's what you do when you are the child to a parent. Then the other question is, not what do I do for them in my relationship for the person who passed away, but what do I do with myself now that I'm alone or without this relationship in the physical? Or in practical words, how do I grow up? How do I make it without this person by my side? So on the theoretical level and on the mental stage, you're not without them. They're still very much part of your life. They still inspire you or worry you or love you and pull strings for you. They're very much part of your life. But again, on a practical level, can I succeed without them? Is my life now permanently handicapped or derailed? And the answer is the opposite. Some of the greatest people in Jewish history were orphaned at a very young age. Throughout history. Your life is not derailed. Maybe the opposite. Some people need parents. They can't function without, so the parents are there. Some people can function as orphans. So if the parent is not there, it means you have the ability to function and to succeed and to fulfill the purpose for which you were created without that assistance. It should be encouraging, empowering. Anytime something happens in life, you were very good at a certain sport, but then you got injured and now you can't play that sport anymore. Life is derailed. Or has your life taken a turn for the better? There's something more important you need to do. So it's not a loss. It's being pushed in the right direction. So anytime life changes, you turn to God and say, I thought I was doing what I needed to do, but no, so what do I need to do? If not this, then what? Not if not this, then I quit or nothing. Life comes in many layers and many dimensions, and you finish with one, you start the next. So for a number of years, you functioned within this relationship, in the physical. Now you got to function on a higher level, a more important level, and you have the capacity to do it. So it's a challenge. Speaking to a teenage girl who was very, very dysfunctional after losing a parent. And she was very articulate in how terrible and how this is impossible and it's unfair. And after she finished that whole really articulate presentation, she was expecting some sympathy or pity. But instead I said, so what are you going to do? Took her a little by surprise, but it's not like she hadn't thought about it. Just nobody ever said that to her. People tell her, oh, it'll be good, everything's fine, and oh, I feel so bad for you. What can I do to help you? But when I asked her, so what are you going to do? Yeah, it's a big mess. What are you going to do? She said, I've been thinking that now that I know how painful and difficult this is, when I get older, I will help people manage this with this tragedy. I said, you just told me that it's not manageable. You just told me that it's a disaster from which there is no recovery. She said, I didn't mean that. There's always some solution. We have it in us. God doesn't challenge us with more than we can handle. Not that there aren't tragedies we can't handle, but then it's not a challenge. So God doesn't expect you to handle things you can't handle. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt. If God is giving you this, it's a challenge, not a permanent handicap. It's a challenge. And he won't challenge you unless he knows you can. So you give a child time, let him grieve, let him mourn, let him feel terrible, let him give up on life for a while. And then you say, okay, that was painful. That's the bad news. Now, where's the good news? What are you going to do to increase life? Because you see how death is really not good. So we got to not only keep a balance, we got to make life much more exciting than death. Because it is. Life is everything. Death is nothing. We don't believe that when a person dies, he goes to a better place. There's no better place. He goes back to where souls come from. Why is that a better place? The body goes back to where it came from. Is that a better place? Earth to earth. Not better. It's just natural. Soul goes back to heaven where it came from. So now it's a soul among souls. Okay. Better? What's better? The miraculous union of a body and a soul, that's better. That's miraculous. A body being a body and a soul being a soul, okay. What's good about it? So yeah, the soul goes back to being a soul and it's more comfortable. It can't be hurt anymore. The pain is gone. So it's nice. It's not better. That's why we mourn the loss of life. Not our loss. Not poor me. We grieve the loss of life because it's not good for life to end that way. It's not good for a soul to just be a soul and for a body to just be a body. What is good is when the soul is in the body, fully, meaning in good health. Because all illness is the soul not really reaching some part of the body. That's what illness means. Some disconnect between body and soul. So when the soul is in the body fully, in every cell of the body, then you have a healthy person. That's better. So if you don't appreciate the greatness and the wonder of being alive in this world, then why are you so upset when somebody leaves this world? The reason we object to death is not because it's scary. The reason we object to death is because life is so much more important. So yes, it's a tragedy when a soul leaves its body. It's a tragedy for the body. It's a tragedy for the soul. Now it rests in peace in heaven. So what? That's sad. Because it can't accomplish anything in heaven. The only place a human being can be productive, a partner with God in creation, is when the soul is in the body. And that's why invariably, without any doubt, the soul will sooner or later come back to its body. Homesick. Wants to be back in its body, productive. having free choice, being able to serve God. Sitting in heaven, God serves you, like in a retirement home. You're old, you're feeble, they're nice to you. We don't want that. We want to be young, we want to be productive, we want to be necessary. On earth, you're necessary. In heaven, you're retired. So, does this help with children who are going through terrible? Of course it does. Because the biggest problem with loss for a child is that they don't know what happened. And if they don't know what happened, then it's frightening, because what else is going to happen that nobody understands or knows? So they've lost their grip on life. It's too unknown, it's too unpredictable, it's too insecure. Death can happen and nobody even knows why and what, and that's pulling the rug out completely from under their the security blanket. They need to know what's going on. More than anything else, more than sympathy, more than comforting, more than even support. They need to know what happened. So the finishing final touch to this whole picture: why does and when does the contract run out? The days that the soul is going to be in a body. When does it run out? And why does it run out? Mostly it's because the person has achieved the purpose for which it came into this world. When you've done what you're meant to do, then you go back and relax until you can return to your body when the world no longer needs to be fixed. When the world becomes what it is meant to be, then all souls and bodies will be compatible, because heaven will be on earth, earth will be heavenly, body and soul will not be that different, and so they will come back together and enjoy what's the most heavenly of places. Earth will become more heavenly than just heaven. So why does a person pass away? When its mission is over and it succeeded in its purpose, then it can rest and wait for the rest of us to complete our job in making the world perfect, and then all souls in heaven will come back to their bodies. But this is such fundamental stuff. Now, when people say, get a grip, get a grip. You're all devastated, you're falling apart, and people say, get a grip. What does that mean? Become callous? Like some professor once said, have the courage to admit that life makes no sense and go on. What a philosophy. Have the courage to admit that life makes no sense and then go on living. There's such double talk. If life doesn't make any sense, what am I going on with? Well, get a grip. Get a grip. But to understand what's going on, that's kind of getting a grip, no? If you can get your mind around what's happening, that's getting a grip. Without becoming jaded or cynical. We were having this debate on campus with this professor who should have known better. His philosophy on life is, life makes no sense. Don't try to figure it out. Have the courage to admit that it's all senseless and then go enjoy. A human being with intelligence in their brain cannot enjoy what doesn't make sense. We're not amoebas. So knowing what life is, knowing what death is, knowing why it comes, why it ends, that is so crucial. So feel empowered with this information and pass it on to the children. Whatever mystery is left after that, they can handle. They don't need everything to make sense. They just need a grip. We're at this stage in history. Now people can say, how come I never heard this before? Well, when did you make this up? Death is forever. Life is very temporary. And there are many quotes in the Torah that says that. What is a human being? A drifting cloud, a puff of smoke, here today, gone tomorrow. The meaning of that is, if you don't know why you're here, then that's what it looks like. You come, you go, what did you accomplish? What happened? If you know why you're here and you know what you accomplished, then it looks very different. I came, I saw, I conquered. Doesn't matter how long it took or how short. So it is a radical change in thinking. It is. So why all of a sudden? Well, we're getting closer to the time when death will be discontinued. It will have served its purpose and will no longer be necessary. So as we're getting closer to that, we are able to understand it better. We have a different perspective historically. We are so close to the coming of Mashiach, to the time when souls will return to their bodies, that now it's starting to make sense to us. And it really does make sense. Death is forever and life is temporary. That's practically suicidal thinking. Cannot be true. Should not be true. So yes, we are experiencing a different kind of death. Knowing how temporary death is, that changes everything. And yes, there are souls that have left their bodies 4,000 years ago, like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They're waiting for 4,000 years to come back to their bodies. We even know where their bodies are buried. It's a long time to wait. But people who pass away in our time, in the last 8 months, let's say, their return is a minute compared to the 4,000 years. So their death is really temporary. That's why it's starting to make sense to us. In fact, 8 months ago, I couldn't talk about this. People weren't hearing it. It sounded too fantastical. But now, 8 months later, it rings true, because it is. So this is what we need to tell our children. This is not a psychological problem, or before it becomes a psychological problem. We need to tell our children what life is, what death is, what the purpose is, and where we stand. What are we up to in this project? Progress report. Have we gotten closer? Are we almost done? Do we have a long road ahead? What's going on? Make sense of life. Makes it easier to live. Makes it easier to handle the loss. We are, after all, intelligent beings. And when we get a mental grip on what's going on, we can handle the emotions. So, I don't know if this is what you expected to hear, because this is not conventional wisdom. But then again, conventional wisdom hasn't done so well in a crisis. So give it a try. Share this wisdom with your children, whether they're suffering from a tragedy or not. So it'll either heal or prevent the negative consequences of loss.
Shalom Aleichem. How are you? You know, I do a lot of talking, a lot of Zooming, many classes, many subjects, but that's all formal stuff. Hopefully good stuff, but formal. We also have a Wednesday night meeting that's more informal and kind of Hamish. If you want to join us for that kind of an event, interactive, time for questions and so on. If you want to join us for this side of conversation, click on the link below and join us every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Well, maybe not every Wednesday night, but we try to make it every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, a more informal chat, which can be more enjoyable at times than the formal stuff. So check it out. Click on the link and join us. Try it, you'll like it.